Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to the second part of our two-part series focusing on stories of wedding day murders. If you haven't seen part 1, be sure to check that out first. We'll leave a link in the description below. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this. It really helps us to continue building the channel. With that out of the way, here is part 2 of 2 tragic cases of wedding day murder. In the summer of 2014, 50-year-old Kelly Ecker and her 10-year-old son moved in with Kelly's soon-to-be husband, 54-year-old Scott Sampson, in Lost Creek Township, Indiana. Scott had purchased the luxurious ranch house that spring for the three of them to live in, ahead of he and Kelly's marriage, which was to take place that coming fall. The 7,000 square foot home was located in a secluded area just east of Terre Haute. The large property was bordered by cornfields on one side and enveloped by a large wooded area on the others. It was complete with 5 bedrooms and 6 bathrooms, and a huge finished basement and garage. However, just days after Scott and Kelly were married, it would be left standing empty, its front door boarded up with shattered glass covering the front steps, the site of a terrifying tragedy. Kelly and Scott's relationship, like many, began at work. They were both employed at Union Hospital in Terre Haute, with Scott working as an anesthesiologist and Kelly as a nurse in the intensive care unit. Scott became interested in Kelly after noticing her sometime in early 2013, while they were both at work. He soon asked a fellow doctor that knew Kelly to introduce them, and soon they began having lunch together. Not long after that, Kelly and Scott were going out on more formal dates, and the relationship was quickly becoming serious. Based on comments made by Kelly's friends and coworkers, it's no wonder why Scott was attracted to her. She was a vibrant, fun-loving, and charismatic person who was uncommonly hard-working and passionate about her job. She was known for going the extra mile for her patients, staying long after the end of her shifts to talk to them, help them, and make a concerted effort to get to know their families. Despite all of these admirable traits, Kelly never seemed to be lucky when it came to romance. She had been married once, but it hadn't worked out. Her other relationships had likewise failed for one reason or another, and usually didn't last long term. Those that knew Kelly the best observed that she lacked self-esteem when it came to relationships. It was obvious to everyone around her that she was an amazing woman, but for whatever reason, she didn't seem to view herself this way, and felt like she wasn't good enough. To the casual observer, it might have appeared like things were finally turning around for Kelly when she started dating Scott Sampson. He was recently divorced and had children, and it looked as though the two of them would make a great couple who could empathize with each other's situations. However, things soon took a turn for the worse. It turned out that Scott was anything but empathetic and caring towards Kelly. He quickly became extremely possessive of her and lashed out at those in her life that he viewed as taking attention away from him. This was particularly true when it came to Kelly's parents and her young son. According to them, whenever Scott was forced to be around the family, he would remain mostly quiet, refusing to talk to anyone but Kelly. He also went out of his way to plan as many activities as possible without Kelly's son, and would grow annoyed or angry if Kelly forced him to include the young boy. Despite Scott making far more money than Kelly, those close to her routinely watched him take advantage of her financially, doing things like getting up from the table if they were at dinner in order to stick her with the bill. He was also verbally abusive towards Kelly, even in front of her friends and family. Because they both worked at the hospital, there was no escaping Scott's obsessive and controlling behavior, even while Kelly was on the job. Coworkers routinely witnessed him taking over areas of her workspace to do things like eat lunch, and he would often demand to know where she was from people working in the ICU if he couldn't immediately find Kelly when he showed up there. Due to the overtness of Scott's abusive behavior towards Kelly, it was no secret to anyone close to her in her life that her relationship was not a good one. As a result, many, including Kelly's parents and her friend Charisse, were not shy about expressing their distaste for Scott. Near the beginning of their relationship, Kelly always seemed to have excuses for his behavior. Other people just didn't know Scott the way she did, she said, and he was only like this because he had been hurt in the past. However, even when Kelly herself tired of these excuses and tried to end the relationship, she never seemed to be able to manage to make a clean break. Scott would reportedly call and text her phone incessantly, and if she ignored him long enough, he would show up at her home and wait outside, sometimes honking the horn of his car. When Kelly inevitably caved and let him in, he would apologize profusely, beg her to get back together, and promise that things would be different. Kelly would want to believe him, and the cycle would continue. What was worse was that Scott appeared to know how to apply this emotional pressure on Kelly in a calculated fashion. If he sensed that she was getting ready to end things, he could be just charming enough or pull off a big enough gesture to make her stay. This was apparently how he and Kelly eventually got engaged. He showed up at work one day with a bouquet of roses and proposed in front of dozens of Kelly's friends and co-workers at the hospital. Feeling enormous pressure and not wanting to embarrass Scott, she said yes. Though Kelly and her son moved in with Scott that summer, as their wedding day approached, she knew that she could not go through with it. However, at the same time, she felt trapped and feared what Scott might do if she tried to leave him for good. According to her friend Charisse, it was at this point that she came up with a plan. She would take part in the ceremony in an attempt to appease Scott and make it appear that everything was normal. But she would secretly not sign the marriage license and would move out of the Lost Creek Township home without Scott knowing soon after. A week before the wedding, Kelly secretly rented a house for her and her son and made arrangements with a friend to get a U-Haul to move her and her son's things. It seemed like only a matter of time before she would be free from Scott's abuse. On the day of the ceremony, October 4th, 2014, Kelly still appeared to be confused about what she wanted to do. She was reportedly distraught in the bridal dressing room, crying before pulling herself together enough to walk down the aisle. According to those in attendance, the ceremony itself was awkward, and aside from the quick kiss as part of the proceedings, seemed to be devoid of affection between the bride and groom. Kelly's parents weren't even in attendance. The original plan for the evening was to have the reception in the yard on Kelly and Scott's large property, but after 2 days of serious rainfall, the ground was too wet, and last-minute reservations were made at a banquet hall at Terre Haute's historic Ohio building. Much like the wedding ceremony, the reception was also filled with tension, as Scott refused to mingle with guests and spent almost the entire time downing drinks at the bar. Witnesses said that they didn't see Kelly and Scott speak to each other once during the entire celebration. Adding an even greater damper on the evening, Scott reportedly lost his temper when he discovered that the credit card he tried to use to pay for the reception was declined. He stormed off a short time later and went home, leaving Kelly behind to awkwardly deal with the situation. To save face, Kelly invited close friends and guests still in attendance to come to their home for an after-party, an offer that several people amazingly accepted despite the uncomfortable circumstances. During that after-party, things deteriorated even further between Kelly and Scott, and they were heard arguing by their guests. The subject of that argument officially remains a mystery, but we found a couple of different sources that alleged that it may have been about Kelly and Scott's prenuptial agreement. There is also speculation that at some point Kelly may have told Scott about her plans to leave him, informing him that she had not actually signed their marriage license. When the wedding was officially over, the only people left behind in the house that night were Kelly, Scott, Scott's parents, Kelly's son, and Kelly's friend Charisse. Kelly had reportedly asked Charisse to stay the night, and she had agreed, settling into one of the house's basement bedrooms once all the other guests had left. According to Charisse, not long after she fell asleep, she awoke to find Scott standing over her bed. He appeared to be in a blind rage and screamed at her to get out of his house. Charisse complied, gathering her belongings and heading upstairs and towards the front door. Before she left, she had one final interaction with Kelly, in which she asked her multiple times to come with her. Despite her pleas and Kelly's obviously terrified demeanor, she refused and stayed behind. When Charisse got home, she called Kelly immediately. There was no answer. Beginning at 1:25 a.m. that morning, Kelly made a total of 3 haunting phone calls to 911. In the first, she was only able to give her address before the call cut off. In the second call a minute later, she repeated her address, saying that her husband was beating her and that he had guns. In the third and final call, sounding extremely distressed, she could be heard yelling, "Oh my God," before multiple gunshots were audible in the background. When police arrived at the scene 15 minutes later, they were led into the home by Scott's parents. Kelly was found dead in her son's room. Though thankfully the boy had not been hurt, he was still tragically sitting by his mother's side. While Kelly's injuries would have likely been fatal regardless of how quickly help arrived, the reason it took police so long to get there was because, in her acute state of distress, Kelly had mixed up the numbers in her address. Her cell phone was also not able to be traced, and it was difficult to make out the address of the secluded property where she lived. After evacuating Scott's parents and Kelly's son from the house, police turned their attention towards finding Scott. They wanted to make sure that he was unable to escape the premises, fearing that if he did, he could disappear into the woods or even attempt to break in to another nearby residence. Scott's father told police that he had awoken to find his son in a full-blown rage, breaking down the door of Kelly's son's room and firing off a total of 9 shots. After that, he had run to the garage for more ammunition and made his way into the basement. A tactical squad arrived at the house a short time later, and a robot was sent into the basement of the house to attempt to locate Scott. His body was found next to his gun safe. He had taken his life through a single gunshot wound to the head. The discovery added an extra layer of tragedy to an already heartbreaking case. With Scott dead, Kelly's grieving family weren't even able to face the person that had taken her away from them. A few years later, Kelly's parents brought a lawsuit against Scott's insurance company on behalf of Kelly's son, in an attempt to get them to pay damages for the young boy's unimaginable loss. However, at least from what we could find, it seems that that lawsuit was mostly unsuccessful, and most of the claims in it were dismissed. The story of Kelly Ecker is a poignant and haunting reminder of just how terrifying and dangerous domestic violence can be, especially in the way that these cycles can feel inescapable and victims can feel helpless while in them. Even when the red flags are obvious to a person and everyone around them, all too often, the psychological impact of abuse keeps people trapped inside these relationships until it's too late. Just like it did with Kelly Ecker. That brings us to the end of our list. Do you know of any other cases like this that you think we should check out? Tell us about them in the comments section below. As always, if you enjoyed our video, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this, making sure to hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our latest releases. Thank you for watching.